more, read more Quran, and just try more to be a better person, to get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And as the hadith continues, in the last 10 days of Ramadan, he would try even harder than the previous 20 days in Ramadan. So alhamdulillah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allowed us to enter Ramadan. So it's upon us then to make thanks for this gift which he has given us. And as the scholars say, the best way to thank someone is to use what they have given you in the right way. Is to use what they have given you in the right way. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, وَإِن شَكَرْتُمْ لَأَزِيدَنَّكُمْ, that if you thank me, I will increase you. So if we thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the fact that he has entered us into Ramadan and he has gathered us here in this place, alhamdulillah, with brothers and beloved people, then inshallah Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will increase us. And the best way to thank him is to use what he has given us in the right way. And the scholars like giving the example, if you gave someone, say, a pen, and they said, thank you for the pen, and they got the pen and they scribbled all over the walls, you'd say, what kind of thank you? It's not a thank you. But if they took the pen and they made a beautiful piece of artwork with it, or they wrote something, they wrote some poetry with it, that's a true thank you. So similarly, to thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it's not merely saying alhamdulillah, it's not merely saying shukrillah, it's using this gift for to its most, being that we're using Ramadan for what it should be used for, being getting closer to him subhanahu wa ta'ala, and praying and fasting and reading Quran and giving sadaqah, inshallah. So we thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for that, and we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us of those who make the most of Ramadan, and to make us of the people of Ramadan, inshallah. So continuing from when we were on Friday night, continuing from Imam al-Nawawi's Al-Maqasid, translated by Sheikh Nuh al-Kala, the Sheikh continues by talking about the following who are not required to fast. So explaining what he's mentioned in the first paragraph, who Ramadan is obligatory for. The following people, or the following four people, it's not obligatory for them to fast the month of Ramadan. And to go over them briefly, the first one, of course, is the non-Muslim. The person who isn't Muslim doesn't have to fast. Secondly, a child. So a child, what we say is, one, beneath the age of puberty, one who hasn't reached puberty. And we mentioned in the last lesson the benefit of getting one's child used to fasting even before they've entered puberty, being that we receive a reward for that as the child does. And one of the other beautiful things is, when we do this, we find that inshallah our children will reach the age of puberty and they're already used to fasting Ramadan. Similarly with prayer, as the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ taught us with prayer, he told us to tell our children to pray from the age of 7. And they haven't reached puberty yet at 7. Most children haven't reached puberty at age 7, but he told us to tell our children to pray when they're 7 years old, such that by the time they already hit puberty, they're used to praying. It's something they're used to doing already. And unless for the other kind of example that we do is, if we don't get our children used to praying, or don't get our children used to fasting, when all of a sudden they've hit puberty and we say, okay, now you have to fast and you have to pray and you have to cover your aura, a child can get, what's all this? All of a sudden I have to do this, and they can be quite overwhelming and a bit of a shock, and they may not even like it. It's like, why do I have to do this all of a sudden? But if we get our children used to it, inshallah, then it makes it easier for them. And alhamdulillah, in a community like this, it encourages our children, when the children see their elders fasting and the children see their elders praying, they want to be like their elders. And I remember the daughter of a family friend, when she was 4 years old, she wanted to wear a hijab. She says, I want to wear a hijab, I want to be like mum. And that's how children are, alhamdulillah. So the more we practice and the more we are an example for our children, inshallah, it helps them be better Muslims too, inshallah ta'ala. And the third group of people who on whom fasting isn't obligatory or isn't compulsory are those who are insane, those who have lost the intellect or don't have control of the intellect. And the scholars kind of distinguish between that, about someone whose intellect then, someone who has like a mental disability, or someone whose intellect was taken away by another means, being they were intoxicated and the like. And if it comes to someone who was afflicted by a disability or whatever before the age of puberty, then this person, the scholars say, inshallah, before the age of puberty, they were afflicted by a mental disability, then they enter Jannah, inshallah, because they were never at an age, or there was never a time when it was obligatory upon them to follow Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's sharia. However, if someone then reached the age of puberty and then had some sort of mental disability, and the scholars differ on this, and they say that whatever state this person was in when they had the disability, then that's the state Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala writes them upon. Being that if this person was a good practicing person, and then they were afflicted with some illness and they became mentally disabled, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala writes for them that they continued on this state, that they were good believing people. And if someone was a disbeliever, or someone was a sinner, and then they were afflicted with a mental disability, then they say Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala writes that they continued upon this state. And some of the scholars have disputed that, and they've said that inshallah, whichever the case, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for His mercy, because as we know in the Quran, He says that His mercy encompasses all things. So no matter what state it is, or no matter what the scholars say, we still desire to receive from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's mercy. And then the scholars talk about the person who's insane, or quote unquote insane, who doesn't have his mental faculties about him, but not from a natural means, being not a disability, but being that they're intoxicated, for example. This person, if they brought about their own mental insanity, or they got themselves drunk, then they're held accountable for whatever acts they do. So if someone got drunk, for example, or took some amount of drugs and was intoxicated, and then went out and committed sins, and then did this and fornicated or killed someone, then they're taken into account for the sins they committed while they were intoxicated, because they brought about their own intoxication. They brought about their own insanity. However, if someone was just, his insanity got brought about, like they spiked his punch or something, they gave him alcohol he didn't know, he took something he didn't know and he got drunk, or his mind was lost, and he did whatever it was he did, the scholars say this person isn't held accountable for his actions, because he didn't bring about his own insanity. However, what we're saying here is the person who's not required to fast is this person who's not insane. So that's all of these cases. The person who's not there, either be it through a mental disability, either before or after puberty, or a sort of intoxication, he's not aware, his faculties aren't there, then this person isn't required to fast. However, if he brought about his own insanity, he got himself drunk, for example, such that the next day he didn't know it was Ramadan, then he's a sinner for that. But if someone intoxicated him without him knowing, then inshallah Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't count that as a sin against him, inshallah. The fourth category of person who doesn't need to fast is, as the Imam continues, someone whom fasting exhausts because of advanced years or having an illness from which he is unlikely to recover. So this is what we can look at as a terminal illness, or someone who's very, very old. So an old person, or someone with an illness like someone who has diabetes, and some types of diabetes that they may have to take medication for every single day, or they can't fast because of the illness, they can't fast, they have to maintain glucose level, a particular glucose level, then this person doesn't have to fast. Now, the ruling on whether this person is ill or has this level of illness or not doesn't go back to him. So it's not upon us to say, oh no, I'm sick, I can't fast, so then just leave it. It has to go back to someone is khabir adl, so someone who is knowledgeable in that area, and someone who is just, a just person who is knowledgeable. So being someone who is just, being that they are a Muslim and that they are known not to lie and just, yeah, no worries, don't fast, I'll look after you. Not someone like that, someone who is an upholding person in his religion and who is knowledgeable in that area. So if it's a medical thing, someone who knows about that medical thing. Someone, a doctor who knows about diabetes, a doctor who knows about the human body, such that they can make the judgment that if this person fasts, it will be harmful for their health. So if this is done, then this person, he can't fast and he doesn't have to fast. He doesn't have to fast. Now, as the book continues, none of the above mentioned is obliged to fast or to make up missed fast days. So if someone isn't a Muslim or a child or someone who's insane, they don't have to fast. However, someone who misses a fast because of the illness, then they have to, instead of fasting, give out an amount of food in kind of in absentia, being that they're not fasting, they have to give out an amount of food, which is enough to feed one person, which scholars have given definition of about, ends up being about half a liter of food, being a half a liter of grain, which would be enough to feed one person for a day. If they made rice or grain and they made it some sort of food. So this person who can't fast because he has an illness, or he can't fast because of his age and his body can't take it, then he doesn't have to make up that fast because he can't take it. But instead of fasting, he has to give out this food. Now, how is the food given? He can either give it out himself, or these days people give it out to charities and the like. But what matters is food has to be given out. Food has to be given out. So if he takes it upon himself to maybe go to a poor person and give him some food, or to go to the mosque and the mosque has another thing, or the community have like a group of people who give out charity food, or he could maybe give it out in terms of money to a group, but these people who he gives it out to have to give out the food. So in the end, food has to be given out. You can't say, okay, have some money, and that's it. The people who take the money have to then give out food, so that should be understood by those who collect the money for him, inshallah. So he gives out this roughly half a liter of food or half a liter of grain for every fast day that he misses. So if he couldn't fast at all, Ramadan, 30 days, he gives out that for every day, so that's about 15 liters for that 1 year, inshallah. The Shaykh then goes on to continue in the following chapter where he says, making up fast days missed for an excuse. So someone that has an excuse and he didn't fast, what do we do to make these up? The following are not required to fast, though they are obliged to make up fast days missed. Making up according to our school, meaning that one fasts a single day for each obligatory fast day missed, being that in the madhab of Imam Shafi'i, for one day which one doesn't fast for whatever reason, which the Shaykh will go on to give, they are required to fast 1 day. So in the previous example, we had three groups of people who didn't have to fast at all, being the person who isn't a Muslim, or the child, or someone who is insane. And we had one group who doesn't have to fast, but they have to give out an amount of food, someone who's too weak or too ill to fast. Now the Shaykh is talking about people who they have to make up that fast. They didn't fast for whatever reason, but now this fast they have to make it up outside of Ramadan. And the first group is those who are ill, the person who is sick. The illness that permits not fasting being that which fasting would worsen, delay recovery from, or cause one considerable harm with. Being that if someone were to fast, again, going back to not his own judgment, oh, I can't fast, I'll get sick. But if a doctor deems that if this person fasts, he will get worse. Not like a common cold, but an illness which, if one fasts, then their sickness will be significantly decreased. If it were judged by a doctor, this person has this illness, this person doesn't have to fast this day. However, they have to make that up later on in the year outside of Ramadan. And this person can make it up any time in the year, being that if their Ramadan was in the summer, they can still make it up in the winter when it's easier. They just have to make it up. They don't have to find an equivalent day. If it was 30 degrees, they don't have to wait for another 30-degree day. If they were fasting on Ramadan in the summer and it was hot, but they couldn't fast because they were ill, they can make up a fast even when it's a short day if they want. They just have to make up that fast, inshallah. The second group of people who have to fast, have to make up the fast, is the person who is traveling. And we touched on briefly in the last lesson, someone who is traveling. And we equated the distance of travel to about 80 kilometers. Here the Shaykh has equated it to 81 kilometers. So if someone travels this distance of 81 kilometers after having left their town or their city, and they leave their city before dawn. So they've left in the middle of the night, or they left at night, for example, and they're out, say if they're traveling from Melbourne to Sydney, and they've left that night before dawn or before Fajr, this person doesn't have to fast. However, he has to make up this fast later on, being he just fasts again this 1 day. The third group of people, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to protect us from being one of them, is someone who has left Islam. So someone who during Ramadan left Islam, or whenever left Islam, such that Ramadan passed and then came back into Islam. This person needs to make up the fasts they missed when they weren't a Muslim. The difference between this person and someone who wasn't Muslim to begin with is, the scholars say, someone who wasn't Muslim, well, he doesn't know. He wasn't Muslim, he didn't believe. But someone who was Muslim, and then he left Islam, and then came back, this person knew the truth, he was on the truth. Because of his prior knowledge, they say all the things he missed, being his fasting and even his prayer, he has to make up. If he left Islam, we seek refuge from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from that. But if someone were to leave Islam for say 1 year or 2 years or 3 years or whatever it is, and then come back, they would have to make up their worship that they missed in this period, because they were believers, they left and then they came back. So that needs to be made up, inshallah. The fourth category of person who doesn't fast but has to make up that fast is the woman who is on her monthly cycle. And we touched on that briefly in the previous lesson. The woman who is on her monthly cycle needs to make up her fasts. However, she doesn't need to make up her prayers. She has to make up a fast. And the scholars say, because if she had to make up her prayers, it would be too difficult. So let her make up her fasts, inshallah. And that's what we ask her to do, and that's it. If the ill person or traveler takes it upon himself to fast, it is valid. Though a fast by someone who has left Islam or a woman in menstruation or period of postnatal bleeding is not valid. Being that if the person who is sick, is very sick or very ill, or someone who is traveling, they say, no, I'm going to fast, I'm going to do it anyway. So that's okay, alhamdulillah. That's a dispensation which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given them, but they don't have to take it. As the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said in a hadith, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala though likes it when people take from the gifts that He gives them. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us a gift of being able to shorten our prayers when we travel, has given us the gift of not having to fast if we're ill or if we're traveling. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala likes it when we take from His gifts. However, we don't have to. We don't have to. So if someone says, no, I'm going to fast because I want to fast, then alhamdulillah, then it's for them to do that, and that's their choice, inshallah. However, the person who has left Islam, or the woman who is bleeding, then her fast isn't accepted for. She doesn't fast, she can't fast, it's not accepted at all. Just like this woman, she won't be allowed to pray, she isn't allowed to fast. Now that's a woman on her monthly cycle or postnatal bleeding. So after giving birth to her baby, if she's bleeding after that, she can't fast and she can't pray, inshallah. However, it's upon us to keep in mind that some people may get the opinion that, because I'm bleeding, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has kind of cut me off, or I'm not allowed to do acts of worship. I can't pray, I can't fast, I can't read Quran. However, that's not the case. It's upon us to understand that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't cut anyone off from His mercy, doesn't cut anyone off from Him. Anyone can still reach Him. It's just particular acts of worship that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't accept from someone in that time. So for the woman who is bleeding, be it a monthly cycle or postnatal bleeding, she can't pray or read Quran or fast. However, other acts of worship are open to her. She can do dhikr, for example. She can remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. She can still study. She can still give zakat. She can give sadaqah. She can help people. And these are all acts of worship for her. These are all acts of worship. So what we say is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't cut anyone off. He just says, these acts of worship don't do. Do something else. Do something else. And as some of the scholars have said, if someone is used to doing this, someone is used to fasting a sunnah or used to praying a sunnah, if they're ill or prevented from doing that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala writes that sunnah for them. Similarly, some of them say for the woman who is bleeding, if she's used to doing a sunnah fast or used to reading an amount of Quran, the period that she's prevented from that, inshallah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala rewards her as if she was still performing that act, inshallah. The Shaykh continues that a woman whose period ends during the daytime in Ramadan is recommended to fast the rest of the day and is obliged to make up the fast, being that a woman whose bleeding ends half in the midday, in the middle of the day. So we're fasting Ramadan and a woman's bleeding ends around 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock or whatever. It's recommended for this person, for this woman, not to eat for the rest of the day. She can if she wants to, that's okay. But they say it's recommended that she doesn't, resembling the people who are fasting and giving respect to the month of Ramadan. Giving respect to the month of Ramadan. However, if she wants to eat, that's okay. She still has to make up that day later on though, whichever choice she makes, inshallah. The Shaykh then goes on to talk about some of the sunnahs of fasting. And as the scholars say, the sunnahs of fasting are many. There are many sunnahs of fasting, and it's not enough to fit in like a little chapter or a little book, but they mention some of the sunnahs of fasting. And some of the sunnahs of fasting include delaying the pre-dawn meal to just before dawn, as long as one does not apprehend dawn's arrival, being suhoor, with the meal which one has before Fajr, before dawn. One should make that closer to the entrance of the time to pray. Not too close. Of course, we still have a period called imsak, the imsak period. The imsak period is a period which is close to Fajr. And most scholars say about 10 minutes, some say 15, some say 20. And the longest period, which some of them give for the imsak period, is about 30 minutes. That's the longest kind of period. So this 30 minutes before Fajr or 10 minutes or 15 minutes, one stops eating. This is why, because sometimes there's remaining foods in one's mouth and the like which enter. And also out of caution, just being wary that maybe the time's wrong. Maybe Fajr has entered, we're not sure. So just to be cautious, the scholars say one has to stop before Fajr. How long do we stop? Some have said 10 minutes, 15, and the maximum, which is generally said now, is half an hour before the time of Fajr enters. However, it's sunnah to have this meal closer to Fajr than closer to the middle of the night or closer to before that. So someone can have, for example, a huge meal, eat a lot, or go home now at 9:30, have a big meal, eat all they want, and say, no, I'm good. Wake up for Fajr and you're fasting, and alhamdulillah, that's good. However, it's sunnah to have this meal before Fajr, and it's sunnah to make it closer to the time of prayer. And as the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said about sunnah, about suhoor, he said to his companions, تَسَحَّرُوا فَإِنَّ فِي سَحُورِكُمْ بَرَكَةً. That verily, as he said, that to have suhoor, because verily in suhoor is barakah, or in suhoor is blessings. So the Prophet ﷺ told his companions to have it. There's blessings in that. Even if it's a small meal in that time, it's a blessing. So he told his companions to eat. So we should follow that sunnah, inshallah, and eat and try to make it closer to Fajr time. And some of the scholars said, even if it's a little bit, even just to get from that dua of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, just to get the blessings, even if we just have some water or just have a date, we should try have at least something, inshallah. Hastening the breaking of one's fast. Again, one of the sunnahs of fasting in Ramadan is to break one's fast, to not delay breaking one's fast, not delaying it once we know Maghrib has come in. So we know now it's Maghrib, not, okay, is it Maghrib? Maybe, and then break one's fast. So we know now it's Maghrib. And some people, they normally wait 1 or 2 minutes after Maghrib has come in just so they can make sure, like we don't eat a few minutes before Fajr, just to be careful. Some will delay after Maghrib by 2 or 3 minutes, just to be sure. But not to delay it excessively. To break one's fast once we are sure that Maghrib has come in. So we're sure now it's Maghrib, 100% sure, to break one's fast. And that's again one of the things that the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ encouraged us to do, encouraged his nation to do. And he said, don't be like the Jews. The Jews, one of the things they used to do with their fast was they would delay breaking the fast. They'd say, okay, I'll fast this much. We're going to keep fasting a bit longer. We're going to make it a bit longer. And they used to extend it and delay breaking the fast. However, the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said, no, don't do this. Break one's fast as soon as they're sure that the fast ends. The fast has ended. So as soon as they're sure that Maghrib has come in, one should break their fast, inshallah. And the scholars have said that the best thing to break one's fast with is, of course, dates. And dates in odd number. So one can have 3 dates or 5 dates or 7 dates in odd number. And if there's no dates, then they say water. And after water, some of the scholars have said laban, like milk, like a thick milk. And then after that, some of the scholars have said anything which is sweet, something which is sweet. Why? Because it gives us an energy. Like dates, and as we know, the glucose in it is quickly used by the body and gives us a quick energy. Similarly, they say if none of these are available, then someone should try break their fast with something sweet, inshallah. Again, of some of the sunnahs of fasting, the Imam continues, is avoiding ugly words, being slander, lying, and foul language, which are always unlawful, but even worse when fasting. And that's something which should be emphasized, that the scholars will talk about fasting, but fasting being more than just not eating and not drinking. But when the Muslim fasts, he abstains from committing all kinds of sin, which means that he also abstains from lying or talking badly about people. The believer fasts from these things, being that it's not only his stomach which is fasting, his mouth is fasting, so he's not committing haram with his mouth, his tongue is fasting, his hands are fasting, he's not doing haram, his eyes are fasting, he's not doing haram with his eyes, his feet are fasting, he's not going to anywhere haram with his feet, his ears are fasting, not listening to any haram. And that's a more closer reality or full reality of fasting. It's not merely not eating, but it's protecting oneself from sinning and it completely. As the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said, as-siyam junnah, as-siyam junnah, and junnah is like a shield or a protection. And so the fasting protects the believer from falling into sin. When we are fasting, if we see sin or someone is inclined to sin, and the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said in the same hadith, say, inni sa'im, inni sa'im. Someone says to himself, Inni Saim, which means verily I am fasting. So one reminds himself, I am fasting. So if one's fasting and he sees something haram, he says, Inni Saim, Inni Saim. We say it to ourselves to remind ourselves that we're fasting, inshallah. And in that, the scholars say there's a secret because it's the words of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. When we say Inni Saim, it has an effect on us because the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said those exact words. So it's about making one's whole body fast from sin, and that's how we enter this Junnah, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, is protection from falling into sin when one fasts. And that's a complete fasting. And some of the scholars have then elaborated and said that lying or backbiting or slandering a person when fasting, as most of the scholars have said, then wipes out the reward of that fast. So if one's fasting, however, they're talking about people, they're spreading lies, and they're backbiting their brothers, then they're not receiving a reward from that fast. They still have to fast, but they don't receive a reward from that fast. So it's as if they fasted for nothing, as the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said, how many people fast, but they don't receive from their fast except al-ju' wal-atash. They don't receive from their fast except hunger and thirst. So they were fasting, they weren't eating or drinking, but maybe they sweared about people, they spread lies, they spoke about people behind their back. So they're not receiving anything from their fasting. There's no reward, but they're hungry and they're thirsty, and that's it. And some of the other scholars have then gone further and said that that spreading lies or backbiting when one's fasting is breaks one's fast completely, as if they ate something. They're a minority of the scholars, but it's something to keep in mind that one of that knowledgeable scholars in our religion have been of the opinion that even lying or slandering or backbiting during the day of Ramadan breaks one's fast completely. So it's something which one should be mindful, such that we can reach, inshallah, a reality of fasting, a complete fasting, such that our fasting isn't just not eating and not drinking, but a fasting which is closer to the fasting of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, where he sallallahu alaihi wasallam protected his whole body. He didn't commit any sins at all through his life, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And Ramadan is an opportunity for us to emulate him and try to be more like him, inshallah, by doing this, and by reading more Quran and by praying, and to establish community and familial ties, inshallah. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to enable us to do this and to make us of those, as we said earlier, of the people of fasting, of the people of Ramadan. One of the doors, one of the gates to enter Jannah, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, is Bab Rayyan, or the door of Rayyan. And Rayyan is like quenching. And this door, the Prophet ﷺ said, is for those who fast a lot. People who fast a lot, being they fast Ramadan, they fast Sunnah, inshallah. This door is open for them to enter. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us of those people who can enter Jannah for the door of Rayyan, inshallah. Alhamdulillah Rabbil
Alameen. Sheikh, before we finish that, just a very quick question. I don't know you have mentioned this or not before, because I was away at some points of your talk, but have you mentioned about the ruling of breastfeeding mothers? Because we have some mothers who just have babies nowadays. So what is the rulings, briefly?
For the mother who is breastfeeding, but Allahumma salli ala Muhammad, who is breastfeeding during Ramadan, however, her body can't take the strain of fasting and breastfeeding, then this is a woman, if the doctors, again, being a knowledgeable person, has said that that she can't fast and breastfeed, and the baby requires to be breastfed, and the baby requires breastfeeding, there's no other kind of option there for the baby, then this woman, if she doesn't fast, she makes up her fast. She makes up a fast later on, and some have said she makes up the fast, or she gives out a meal. She gives out a meal instead.
Alhamdulillah. So that's all the talk tonight. We would like to say Jazakallah khairan kasir to our Sheikh Salim. Inshallah, we can meet again sometimes in the month or maybe after that. So thank you very much also for all of the Jama'ah to attend the Tari, the Isya Tari, and the talk today. Alhamdulillah. Sedikit pemberitahuan sekali lagi tentang kaitannya dengan penggunaan alat makan dan alat minum ya. Kami masih lihat ada gelas dan cangkir yang kotor yang ditinggalkan begitu saja. Kami mohon jemaah sekalian untuk membersihkan baik piring ataupun gelas dan cangkir yang digunakan ya, karena tidak ada petugas khusus untuk melakukan itu. Jadi kita lakukan itu masing-masing, insya Allah. Jika ada putra putrinya yang melakukan hal itu, bisa diingatkan putra putrinya atau mungkin orang tuanya yang bisa membantu untuk membersihkan peralatan makan yang digunakan. Baik, demikian dari kami. Terima kasih banyak. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.